any power that can be produced locally. Right, so when you put solar on your home, you've now become a production source on the grid. Right, so you're immediately taking stress off of that local grid, right? Because now you're a production source right there. Solar industry is hot right now. It's very hot right now. And it's a lucrative industry. The industry is not going anywhere. So you'll see a lot of companies pop up out of nowhere. The issue with that is sometimes their install quality is not great. Sometimes they're not even doing the installs in-house.
The solar panels that were built 15 years ago, how did those compare to the production of the ones today?
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Moving Day Podcast. This is Marion here. I got my good friend, Matt Quillen from Classified Realty today. How's it going, Matt?
I'm doing well. Good to see you.
And we have a new guest today, Brian Cartier from Sunrun, today with us. He's going to answer some questions that you might have, and I personally had not too long ago about solar. Brian, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
100%. So, Well, first, before we even go into questions, because I have a lot myself, and then obviously I got some of them from a couple online Ask the Public type of websites.
Okay.
But give us a little bit your background. How did you get started in solar? Why solar? And then we'll go into a couple more things.
So I've been in the industry for about 5 years. Honestly, just got into the industry because it seemed like it was a good opportunity. And then the more that I got to know about the industry and the need for not even just renewable energy itself, but just essentially all the complications that surround electricity in general. You know, it's something that everyone uses. We all need it. We're all going to continue to need it, and more so, you know, with electric vehicles and so forth, and, you know, the fact that we're electrifying everything and weaning ourselves off of fossil fuels. The more I started to understand the need for it and the fact that it's just truly inevitable. I mean, whether you're pro solar or against solar, the fact that it's necessary is just something we can't avoid. And so as I learned more in the industry, I really started to appreciate what I get to do for a job every day, and the fact that what I am doing does make a tangible difference, you know, as more and more so as time moves forward. So it's been a very rewarding career in general. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So where do you feel every time when, you know, we have a new guest, like for example, Matt here with Classified Realty, our clientele, and not just people that end up maybe moving or you know, putting their stuff in storage. Where do you feel in the process of somebody maybe owning a home, planning to buy a home, or maybe planning to sell, upgrade, downgrade, whatever the situation may be? Where do you feel solar fits in? Like, at what stage in somebody's life do you put solar and say, all right, this is the perfect time? And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's no perfect time. Maybe it's always a good time to think about it, right? Yeah. Where do you feel this process, this product fits into somebody's life?
Well, you kind of threw in a lot of variables there, so I'll do my best to try to answer the question. But it's kind of like, I mean, you can ask when the best time to plant a tree was. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now, right? So it's really kind of the same thing. So if you own a home, and your house gets enough sun to, you know, produce any electricity and is going to meet installation requirements like the health of the roof and the structure of the home and your electrical system, you know, working for it, then there's no better time than now if you haven't done it already.
Gotcha. So we were chatting about this before we started the podcast. It was, I think, my first introduction to solar. I mean, of course, I knew about the product and all that, but I own a house. I still do. I'm not a full-time real estate investor, but me and my business partners' process is we always look for distressed properties in need of a little bit of cosmetic work. And then for a while, the whole process was remodeling them and then put them on Airbnb. And then when COVID hit, we kind of switched. And then a lot of the guys that we sponsor from overseas, they come over, they need rent. So sometimes we help them with rent in these houses. But my first introduction to solar was, I think, about 2 years ago or so, 2.5 years. And then I was in the process of thinking of selling the house. I didn't end up selling it. But how is solar, let's say, affecting in a good way or in a bad way? Or what's your take on a real estate investor, for example, when it comes to solar?
Well, for an investor specifically, I think it's a little bit of a different question because it depends on what your purpose is going to be with that home, and it depends on, I guess, what your long term vision
Of
is
course,
for that home, right? But realistically, that home is going to be using electricity, right? So there's multiple ways of getting electricity. So you can either pay the utility for it, in which case, you can argue dirty electricity or clean electricity, but if you're getting it from the utility, you're paying delivery for that electricity as well. In fact, like normally about half of your bill or so, sometimes more or less.
I was about to ask you, like, what's the percentage?
Is just for delivery, right? So if you're producing it on site, then you're not paying delivery for it, straight away.
That's the simplest. I feel is the simplest way of thinking about this, because I remember a couple of times when I was looking at the electricity bill, I'm like, what is this delivery?
Right.
What is it? What exactly is it?
well, right. But I mean, if we ordered $40 worth of pizza right now and it got here and he charged us $100, we'd send it back.
Right.
Right.
That's a good way of looking at it. All right. So that was more of a selfish question.
I think on the investment side too, though, I think it depends. You don't have the evidence, right? And then you don't have the historical evidence of what you're going to do. Right. You can make predictions and projections on what's going to happen, but you don't have that like hard number that says, look at my electric bill is zero, and then all of the credits I have are carrying me over a certain amount of time after that, high sun time. And then also, like, you're making a decision when you're doing that investment. You're making a decision for someone that you don't know yet. So there might be someone that is very, very much against it. Well, I think a lot more people are getting more comfortable with it. You're seeing it on a lot more roofs, and so it's not the same. I feel like 10 years ago, everyone was very afraid, don't touch it with a 10-foot pole. Right. But I think it's so common these days to see solar that people are less afraid of it.
Yeah.
It's much more prevalent than it was even 5 years ago when I started. It was a lot harder to sell 5 years ago than it is today. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Absolutely.
So to think, or I guess to maybe simplify, I feel like there are a lot of people that don't know the difference, and including myself actually. What's the actual process of the company versus where is the state involved? At what part of the process of the lease versus buy? Or maybe we can even start with what are the options? Like, I know you can buy them, you can lease them, or you somewhere in between, right?
Sure,
I think
sure.
Let's start there, maybe.
Sure. And I want to go back to just not necessarily revise my statement from earlier, but I mean, so like Matt had said, so if it's an investment and you're making a decision and you don't necessarily have all the information yet, sometimes you run into a scenario where there's only so much room on the roof anyway. So it really just depends on, like on my own home, I have solar on my own house, and I don't have it plastered on every single roof surface. I've got it put strategically on the places on my house that I wanted it, that I thought it was going to work and it was going to look nice and all of that. So regardless of how much electricity that home is going to use, if we're making a good use of space, then it should work out fine. But in terms of like the ways to do it, so you can obviously buy a solar system like you buy anything.
You have an idea? Can we give people not estimates based on their square footage, but
sure,
how much does it cost? Like an average. Let's take an average in Massachusetts, single family, 2-3 bedroom house, whatever.
Yeah, it's actually really tough to do that as well, and not trying to dodge the question, but there's so many variables on any particular home. Like everyone's scenario is totally unique. So every system and every offset, essentially how much of their consumption we're offsetting with solar is totally unique. So it's really tough to kind of give a ballpark, but like so. I mean,
to speak to how difficult that is, when we first started, I think so Brian put solar panels on my roof. And when we first did the plans up, you were using Google Maps and all the technology online.
Yep.
I had just removed this giant oak tree over my roof, basically. And so
did that affect?
It completely changed the design and the production and everything. And so, like, a tree is going to change what happens with your solar panels potentially.
Completely.
That's a really good thing that you mentioned that, because I have two huge trees in my yard, and when you just said that, I'm like, oh damn! So if I remove that one, actually, this might it might be probably. I'm assuming it was affected in a good way because now you had more sun coming into the.
Yeah, I had a lot more sun. I mean, I didn't do it for that purpose. I put a pool in, but
I don't blame
the solar
you.
help with that. It helps with the electric pump.
Sure.
All right, so going back to the ways of people deciding if they want to buy, lease, or
so you can purchase a system and own it outright. Then it's yours, right? Just like if you were to, I guess,
buy a car,
right? Then you're responsible for. I mean, the car is going to be under warranty from the manufacturer, but then you're going to be responsible for anything that car could need, maintenance and those kinds of things. So speaking of solar, so you can buy a solar system or you can lease a solar system. Or the street term is a lease. We call it a PPA internally, which is a power purchase agreement. So you're just buying the power from the solar system instead of buying that power from National Grid. So the analogy I use a lot of times is just like getting gas from a different gas station, right? So it's just you're going to need electricity. It's just where you're getting it from. So you can get it from utility. You can get it from solar. And then the other way that's becoming more and more popular, depending on the community, is a prepaid lease. So you can pay for everything up front. So just like with anything, I mean, if you can pay up front, a lot of times you can save some money. So you can do the same thing with a car. Whether you're pro leasing or against leasing a car, you can do a monthly lease on a car where you pay every month, or you can do a one-pay lease where you pay for the entire lease up front, and you're going to save a lot in terms of interest and that kinds of things. So same with leasing a solar system is essentially you can pay for it up front, in which case it'll be the least amount out of pocket, but then you're going to get all the benefits that come along with that lease, like insurance and maintenance and that kind of thing. Whereas if you buy the system, you pay cash for it, you're going to be insuring it yourself under your homeowner's insurance. If something happens to that system, you're going to be responsible for it in some way, shape, or form. And generally, it's not like just any electrician can work on your solar system. That's not necessarily the case. So with a lease, it's insured the entire time. There's a production guarantee. So for some reason the system doesn't produce what we said it would, then there's a reimbursement built into that.
This is only with the lease.
This is only with a lease, right? So if you buy it, and it's supposed to produce 15,000 kilowatt hours. If it doesn't produce that 15,000 kilowatt hours, then that's just what you get, right? If you're leasing that system, it doesn't produce what we say it will, then we're on the hook for that, because that's the product you're buying from us essentially is the power we're providing to you. So if we don't provide that, then we've got to reimburse you for it.
Gotcha. And then this does not apply to the prepaid?
So the prepaid lease is going to come with all the benefits of the lease. So you're going to have the insurance, the maintenance, the production guarantee, all of that. You're just paying up front, so you're saving yourself, the monthly payments.
Interesting.
Right. So how a prepaid lease is generally structured is if you purchase a system, there's some tax benefits there. So there's a 30% federal tax credit that comes from the federal government. So the solar company itself doesn't have any say in that. They're going to charge you whatever the price is to purchase a system, and then when you go and file your taxes next year, then you're going to work with your tax professional to get you that tax credit back. So it's 30%, but it's important to understand that everyone's power consumption scenarios is unique. Their tax scenario is going to be unique, right? So it's going to depend on your tax scenario, whether or not you're going to see the benefit of that 30% tax credit in cash, or if it's just going to reduce your tax liability, or how it's going to work for you may be different than how it works for me. So that just needs to be understood. A lot of times it's not presented properly. But the benefit of the lease is you don't even have to worry about it. That's already so the company that's leasing you the system gets the benefit of that tax credit. But that's one way that they can do that and not charge you anything up front, and then insure the system, maintain it, give you that production guarantee and all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. So do you advise people? I know you said you save up some money. So of course every person is different in terms of how their financial goals and possibilities are.
Sure.
But do you advise people, let's say, all right, if you can afford it, do the prepaid lease. If you cannot afford that, go with a regular lease, and then the buying option would be the latest. I mean, the least of.
Honestly, I really try to make sure I'm providing people with the information and not trying to steer their decision too much.
Right. No.
Right. But in going over the facts, I see less people buying the system. I've seen a lot of people go towards the prepaid option. But even so, the more that I think about it in my own scenario, so even if you have the means to pay cash for it or do a prepaid. If you're going to pay cash for it and you really just you got all this money burning a hole in your pocket and you
just
got
like
to
the car, I guess. Right.
Right. Like you. Well, because if you think about it too, well, and kind of like a car. There's only so many analogies there that work, but kind of like a car. You might have. Let's say you're looking at a $50,000 car. You might have $50,000. You can buy that car cash. Right?
Is it a smart decision? I don't think so. It depends.
Well, no, right? Because I'm sure as an investor, there's something else you can do with that $50,000 rather than tie it up in that car, right? So if you can find a decent interest rate, you'll finance it so you can keep your $50,000, right? So same thing with the solar system. So other than the fact that so if you don't buy that car, you might not have a car payment because you don't necessarily need a new car. Right, but you need electricity. You're going to use electricity. You're going to have an electricity bill no matter what. No matter what, you're going to have an electricity bill. Right, so you can take that $50,000, tie it up in a solar system, or you can keep your $50,000, invest it in something else, and lease your solar system and cut your bill down by a third.
I was just saying, I think an interesting piece of the lease purchase conversation is the end, right? Like so at the 25 years.
Yep. I
mean, the solar panels that were built 15 years ago, how do those compare to the production of the ones today?
That's actually a really good question.
And so when I buy them in 25 years, what are they going to be at that point? Am I going to have a high quality product, producing product at that time compared to what else is out there, or I don't know.
No, it's actually a really good point. I mean, that's actually one of the questions we get a lot is like, well, what happens when the technology is better in 15 or 20 years? So, and that's that. Yeah, if you buy the system, then you bought it, you own it. It's going to be up there, into perpetuity, right? So like 25 years later, I'm using that as the round term essentially, because that's generally the term of a lease. But so 25 years later, if you bought that system, then those panels are stuck up there. No one's removing them because they're yours. If you want a new system, then you're going to have to pay someone to remove them, and then buy another system. So if you're leasing your system, 25 years later, the company is obligated to remove that system. If you want a new one, we can install a new one. Or if you don't want a new one, then we can just remove that system, and you're not on the hook for having to remove it and dispose of it and all of that kind of stuff. Which is, it's hard enough to get a satellite dish taken off your roof if you don't want it anymore.
Yeah, and then actually it kind of leads me to the next question. God forbid something happens. We're just talking about the storm that's going on today, right? A tree hits your roof. It damages, some parts of the roof and some of the panels.
Yep.
Liable for those repairs. Who's liable? Let's start there. Actually.
Yeah, so under a lease, we're responsible for the system itself. So if anything happens to the system, we're responsible for that. Your homeowner's insurance is going to step in for the rest of the repairs. It might be your roof or the home itself, whatever might be damaged.
Gotcha. So then you guys would part of the team will come and remove the panels that are damaged. Now, are these individual panels or they're all tied together? Like, meaning, let's say you have to remove 3. Is the whole system down for the entire time that they get repaired?
That's actually a really good question. I would assume more than, no. It would depend on that system, right? Because so every system being unique, it would depend on the banks of panels and which ones are
and the
connected
amount of
to
panels.
Others. Right. So, I have there are some systems that are installed where half of the panels could be taken off and the rest of them are still going to work fine. It's going to depend on that unique scenario.
Gotcha.
But in most cases, just because one panel's down doesn't mean the rest of the system's going to be shut off.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. When are we deciding in terms of like how high the electricity bill has to be for someone to first consider solar? Like, do you see just, people randomly deciding, okay, I'm going to need solar because I know I can save money on the electricity bill, or I need solar because I know, one, it's a good thing for the environment, it's maybe possibly saving me money, or are we 1,000% sure that, okay, it's saving me money first of all, and then the rest? Or like, what do you see people kind of making this decision?
Well,
typically
it should always cost you less, and I feel like that's one of the major motivators of it is that people, they see their electric bill going crazy, because the cost of electricity is getting outrageous, right? So that can be a big motivator for a lot of people. And then you have a lot of people, more and more people, I feel like today, that just understand the benefit of it, and they understand the bigger picture that savings aside, that I mean, there's global energy shortages all over the world. There's places in this country where the utility is asking you not to use electricity from a certain time to a certain time. There's brownouts and there's blackouts and all of other things. So I've got a customer who's an electrical engineer, and the way he kind of put it to me is like, he's like, we're going to need all of it. We're going to need the dirty electricity we're using now from fossil fuels and all that type of stuff. As long as we can use it, we're going to need it from solar. We're going to need it from wind. We're going to need it from all of the ways we can possibly produce electricity. We need all of it because we're only ramping up. I mean, Massachusetts wants all new vehicles to be.
Is that Mass or Boston?
Electric is it Mass?
To be honest, I'm not sure.
No idea.
But by like 2030, right? So it's like, I mean, if we're going to meet any kind of mandate like that, I mean, we're going to need power from wherever we can get it. So solar is becoming more and more necessary. And it's kind of funny. Every now and then I'll run into somebody who thinks that they don't have a need for it, and it's kind of an interesting mindset if they think that they don't need it, because we all do.
Right. You mentioned, well, I don't necessarily know if Boston or the whole state, but where is Massachusetts compared to, let's say, Florida or the rest of the country fit into on the map of how good of a position is on the map for?
So I could be wrong. I'm not sure where Florida is, but I could be wrong. I think Massachusetts is somewhere between 8 and 10%. Okay. Penetration in terms of solar. Mm-hmm. Right.
The only reason I asked about Florida is we recently opened another location there in Tampa. I think I mentioned to you, Matt.
Okay.
So I was just trying to kind of wrap my head around numbers in terms of that. But
I mean, Florida's got to be higher than that, just because I mean, with that being such a
sunny state.
Right.
I think one of the interesting pieces when you start talking state to state, and I remember having this conversation with you on my back deck, the cost of electricity per state, right? Is pretty.
Differs
Massachusetts
wildly,
is pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know enough about that. But
Well, I mean, I'm not sure what it is in Florida. I know New Hampshire is getting to be pretty close to on par with where Massachusetts is, and residents in New Hampshire aren't used to that either. I mean, generally, New Hampshire's typically been, 20 to 30% less expensive than Massachusetts, and now they've seen their rates increase over 100%. And they're just, I mean, people are, they don't, some people don't know what to do. I mean, when that initially happened, I mean, there was people picketing and all kinds of stuff, but it's just, it's a reality I think a lot of us are going to have to face, that it's just going to be more expensive to provide it the traditional way.
To go a little bit of, again, a lot of these questions might sound selfish because it's just me personally, but I'm assuming a lot more people would have these questions.
Oh, sure.
So the way that your house is positioned and the way that the roof, and then you just mentioned the tree in your backyard, mm-hmm. Is there a way that maybe you think of a couple scenarios where some people might think, oh, my house might have a better shot, or I might have a better shot because of the way that the house is positioned mm-hmm. to produce more because I get more sun or whatever it is, or maybe it's on a taller hill or any kind of scenario like that?
I mean, all those factors matter. I mean, and it's interesting. I mean, general consumers don't always necessarily know if their house gets a lot of sun or not. I mean, sometimes they'll think it gets a lot of sun, because of the times that they're home or the times that they're in their yard, they feel like they're getting a lot of sun.
Yeah.
Right. But then, and sometimes I'll get a call from someone to say, hey, I want to look at solar, and I'll get to the house, or I'll look at their house on my program, and they're in the middle of the trees, and they might get a little bit of sun, but they don't get nearly enough to produce anything. But I mean, typically, your southern-facing roof sections are generally are your best. Southwest is very good, but typically, I might be using terms that aren't necessarily going to make a lot of sense to everybody, but we look at how many hours of sun your home is going to get per year. My program will tell me all of that based on the azimuth of your house, the way it's positioned, and where the tree shading is, and that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
But yeah, you do need to get enough sun for it to make sense for you. Otherwise, it's just not going to work, and then it's not going to work for the company. It's not going to be the company's interest or the customer's interest, and it's just not going to make sense.
Yeah, like if the numbers don't make sense, then
right.
And then you said, I can't remember exactly which question it was. You said roughly, or at least a guarantee that 90% of the. Do you see people getting a lot more than that? And then if you do, what happens with the rest of the electricity? Like, does it get sold to your neighbors, or like what's...
Right. So, and that goes back to the fact that, I mean, we're all going to be using electricity. We're all going to be using more electricity next year than we are this year, and so forth. So the idea, and when we go back to the whole delivery concept, so the utility companies have to source power out from other producers that are all over the place. Like in Massachusetts alone, I mean, we get power from New York, we get power from Canada, we get power from, I think I've seen suppliers that were in Indiana or Texas, all over the place, right? So Rhode Island, what have you. So they're looking for places all over the place that can produce power and essentially send it here, which is why you're paying more and more for delivery. So any power that can be produced locally, right? So when you put solar on your home, you've now become a production source on the grid, right? So you're immediately taking stress off of that local grid, right? Because now you're a production source right there, right? And so anytime that you're producing more power than you're actively using, that extra power is being fed back to the grid, right? And so now you're providing energy into the grid. It's less power that the utility has to outsource from elsewhere. So yeah, you're technically providing power to everyone. You know,
gotcha.
People in your neighborhood, just you're adding you're adding extra power to the grid. So anytime that you do that, so it's called net metering. So what happens is anytime that you send power back to the grid that's over and above what you're using, right? So you're going to get credit from that, or with your utility.
So you pretty much you almost get a refund, or you
yeah,
right?
And I realize more and more I'm dating myself with this analogy, but it's really like it's like rollover minutes on your cell phone. If you remember, it's the same concept. So if you produce 1,000 kilowatt hours this month, but you only use 700 of them, the other 300 get fed back to the grid, and they're going to give you credit for that 300 kilowatt hours. So then all spring and summer, ideally, you're generating
for free.
Right.
Well, I mean,
Right, so ideally you're generating a negative credit balance on your utility bill. So like mine, for example, right now is like around $300 of credit balance negative. So
every month?
No, just right now. So accumulated.
Oh, okay, accumulated. Okay.
So through the spring and summer, in my case, I've got customers who have well over $1,000 in credit balance with National Grid. You know, and then as you go into fall and winter, when we don't have as much sun, you're going to start eating away at that credit balance.
Gotcha. Okay, so essentially, all the credit gets either used by you, or you keep building that credit higher.
You also have the opportunity to pass that on to somebody else too.
You could.
If you had a fantastic year and you were way above what you were going to use, or maybe you lost an energy suck, like whatever.
Well, and that goes to so that can kind of go back to your initial question about investing and so forth. So in Massachusetts, and it's different than in New Hampshire, right? But so in Massachusetts, if I was producing, because I've had the scenario where I've got a family with some teenage kids, and we design a system for their home that's producing 100% of what they're using today, right? And then all of a sudden, 2 of their kids go to college, right? So now they're using way less electricity, right? So now they're accumulating a credit balance that's far more than they're ever going to use.
And then it used to be when you initially quoted them.
Right, because when I originally quoted them, they were using all that electricity. So it was netting them a zero utility bill, right? They weren't paying the utility anything. They were only paying for the solar, right, which is at a much lower cost, right? But now the 2 kids have gone to college, so they're still producing the same amount of solar, but they're using much less electricity. So they're ending up with this credit balance on their National Grid bill, or whoever the utility is, that's essentially not going anywhere because they're not using it. So at least in Massachusetts, so I can take those credits and transfer them to my neighbor or another meter or my investment property. Or
so for example, if I have 3 meters at, like, let's say one house, I can, like, one is mine, the other one a renter, the other one is a common area.
Yep.
If I have one that's just let's say I'm not home, like me and my wife might get home at 7, 8 p.m. every day, and then I don't use a lot, but then I can transfer that to either the common area, right? Because that's maybe the one that's using more. Okay, or to even another property.
Yeah.
Like
So I've actually even had customers whose personal home, personal residence, didn't get nearly enough sun, or they had too many dormers, or too many. The home was not ideal for solar, but they have a investment property on the other side of town that's just cooking in the sun all day, right? So they can put it on that investment property, cover the common meter
their main house,
right, and then send all their credits to their personal residence.
That makes sense.
Right.
All right. So, how are people able to, or like, what are the pros and cons? And I know in this case, this might be a biased question for you because you're with Sunrun. But let's say, how many companies in Mass are for?
Oh man!
So we're talking hundreds, we're talking tens, we're talking thousands.
I mean, that's 50.
Oh, okay. So it's not that bad.
I mean, there
actually
might be 50, maybe 70. I'm not exactly sure. But I mean, there's companies we see kind of pop up out of the woodwork every day. But then
like every industry, pretty much.
Right, like any industry that's hot. The solar industry is hot right now. It's very hot right now, and it's a lucrative industry, right? So, and
not going away.
Right, and it's the industry is not going anywhere. So you'll see a lot of companies pop up out of nowhere. The issue with that is sometimes their install quality is not great. Sometimes they're not even doing the installs in house. They're having them subcontracted by another company. Party. And then what can happen is if any one of those companies end up going out of business, then you can get the runaround if you have any kind of issues or something like that. So it's a good idea to work with a company that's been around for a while. It's a good idea to work with a company that's doing their own installs in house. So like if you're working with Sunrun, then your system's going to be installed by Sunrun, right? We have a couple install partners that we use, but those are kind of few and far between. Generally, we're doing it ourselves, but our volume does get to the point sometimes where we have a couple of well-vetted install partners that will do an installation for us. But we see companies all over the place, that just kind of come out of the woodwork, and sometimes they'll do, a couple hundred installs before they get to the point where, so like with any business, the more customers you get, inevitably there's going to be some issues. I mean, in a perfect world, right, every single person that you install is going to be a happy customer. But in the real world, eventually the more volume
shit does happen.
Right, exactly, right. So the more volume you do, right, the more issues that you're going to accumulate. So when you get to a point when you get to that tipping point where your issues are starting to take up more time than your actual installs are, that's when a lot of companies, and I guess I'm saying that with the consideration that a lot of these companies are well-meaning, right? So they'll come out and they'll have a good mission and they'll really want to do a good job for people. But then when they reach that tipping point that they just kind of can't sustain both.
The growth and the
right.
So actually, you brought up a really important point. So a company comes, installs the solars on somebody's roof. Mm-hmm. 5 years later, they go out of business. Mm-hmm. What happens with the panels? Someone comes in.
No, I mean, the panels are still going to work fine. I mean, if it's a lease, so a lot of these smaller companies aren't offering leasing because they can't. They
can't sustain the 20, 25, whatever the 25-year contract.
Right. If they are offering leasing, then they're selling someone else's contract. Like, so just like, I mean, if you have a mortgage on your house, if your mortgage has been sold, right? So very
it just
similar
happened.
thing.
And random, nobody called me. I just got a letter in the mail.
Yeah.
This is a new account.
I'm like, at the closing, there's that document. Just want to let you know that your mortgage company can sell your mortgage, and then 3 pages later, your mortgage company sold your mortgage already before the closing.
Yeah. Before the closing.
I wish the first time this happened to me, I'm like, what the hell? Like, you guys just sell this like left and right, and nobody. I thought it's a scam for the first time.
I bought my house a year and a half ago, and my mortgage has been sold 3 times already.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
Can't even believe it. Can't even believe it. It really doesn't even make any sense.
You can't make this up.
Right? No, you really can't. But so similar type of thing. Like if you're leasing your solar system and it's with a smaller company, right? Then they're not sustaining that lease themselves financially. They're not able to carry those leases. So that they're going to be selling the lease product of another company, right? So I mean, if you got a lease from
no name or somebody that just
right. Then so more than likely whoever owns that lease is still going to exist, or they're going to sell it to a company that's still going to exist. So you're still going to have at least somebody to collect your money, right? But you're not necessarily going to have somebody to go and service that system easily, right? So I've actually had people reach out.
Oh, like maintenance and stuff,
right.
What's that actually?
They don't really require a lot of maintenance. There's no moving parts or anything like that, which is one benefit to solar compared to wind power and all of those other things where there's no moving parts. So there's not really much to wear out. I mean, a solar cell is going to slightly degrade over time, but it's not like if you've got a wheel that's spinning constantly, so.
But if something happened where the panel weren't working, like I don't know what would cause that,
or something like that, right?
I get a notification on my Sunrun app that says, there's no known issues on my panel. It's working. Where I feel like, oh man, I wish I had more information and I could remember this. I feel like one of my properties, because we were getting ready to sell, they started paying a little bit more closer attention to it, and they realized that one of the panels was not actually working that whole time.
Interesting. Yep.
And so, again, there are pieces, but yeah, if that company went out of business, then there isn't somebody to come and repair that or fix that.
But you said something like you're looking in the app, meaning the app shows you the amount of power that you produce, and it shows you updates on the actual equipment that's installed.
It's pretty simple, but it's just no known issues is up at the top, and then it tells me how much power I've been creating and making.
I mean, you kind of took my whole next question.
97% of cloud.
How do you even know if somebody stops if one of the panels stopped working? But
yeah, the app will tell you. Yeah. There's a diagnostic in the system, so the app will tell you if there's some kind of issue. Normally, you'll receive a call from somebody at Sunrun first saying, "Hey, we're noticing a problem with your system. We're going to schedule somebody to come out and take a look at it." Rarely, it's the panel. A lot of times, it's the inverter that's on the side of your house. There's not a lot really to a solar panel. So generally, when there's something wrong with your system, it's generally not a panel. It could be the inverter. But I kind of compare that to like if your Wi-Fi router needs to be reset.
Right.
It's not a huge deal, right? But kind of.
No, it makes perfect sense. I was just thinking of the scenario of like, all right, maintenance happens, or only if the repairs are needed. But then how do I know as the consumer? But since you have the app, then
you're monitoring it.
You know what's up with it at all times. I'm assuming yes, but what's the difference from a regular residential property versus, let's say, I have a warehouse?
Mm-hmm. So I honestly can't answer that very well. I don't work in the commercial space.
So that's just a different it's a different scenario, but
right.
Gotcha.
I wish I knew more about it, but it's really it's apples and oranges.
No, it just randomly popped in my head because I actually live pretty close to the office, and I'm thinking, this is one of the tallest buildings over there, and there's no trees around.
So the schools and stuff like that, all these things that take up so much space without a tree in the middle of it.
Well, what we can say about that though is you're seeing that more and more. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I've seen a bunch of solars on a lot of different
city buildings all over the place. You're seeing them utilize more space for solar because we just quite frankly need it.
Right. Let's help listeners and other people that plan to get solar at some point in time. Is just they don't know how and what's the process. Let's say somebody might just be interested in finding, all right, how much can I save? Mm-hmm. Is there a website that they can go, or does that question require somebody to go on site? I know we can't give estimates because there's so many variables in between, but is there a website that they can get, I don't know, like at least the process of that and what factors involved this, the pricing and all the other stuff?
Yep. I mean, so you can go to sunrun.com.
Okay.
You can reach out to me, so you can find. I get a lot of people reach out to me via Facebook or even my own.
What's your favorite? So of course we'll put it in the description of this episode.
So on Facebook you can just find me Brian Cartier, BrianCartier. On Instagram it's at @B_Cartier. Cartier spelled just like the jeweler, no relation. I mean the Sunrun website, I believe they're going to be revising it in a little bit as well. But the Sunrun website can give you some good basics. But again, it varies so much from state to state. We operate in 24 different states, so the information on the websites can be kind of vague sometimes. And
it's so broad, right? Like it has to
right. And I honestly kind of caution people to,
base their decisions off of that?
Well, not even just that. I almost caution people in searching for Googling solar or anything like that, because then it's kind of like with mortgages almost. It's
real
like
estate
agent. You typed it into your search bar and get ready for all.
I mean, that's my world now, because we get into the whole marketing and who pays the most for the ads to get, or who does the best ad to pop.
I think the recommendation that I would make and what I have found incredibly valuable is having someone that has longevity in the business that's not going anywhere, right? Because it, just like real estate, just like everything, you've got that like quick money tease where people are like, oh, I'm gonna get in, I'm gonna make big money, and then they realize it's a lot harder to do that, and then they quit. So now who do I talk to? Who do I follow up with? I've sold, I want to say all the houses I've sold have had Sunrun or what used to be Vivint. Before Sunrun bought them. And I don't know that I've always had that same contact, but luckily for me, I have Brian in my pocket, and so I'm able to call him regardless whether it's my personal house or a house in a completely different area. Brian can at least steer me in the right direction. He's not going to answer every single question because it's not in his wheelhouse, but he knows whose wheelhouse I should be hanging out in. And so I think when you go to find the different companies or the different person, find a salesperson that you can build a relationship with, and don't just one-off, see you later. You want that person to be a continual resource for you.
100%. And so it's important that you brought that up. How in your process, I'm assuming you have in the folder some type of material or a postcard with Brian's info?
Yeah, we've actually talked about it quite a few times and gone back and forth and started. We probably should nail that down.
Right. And then we both get busy and we're both going to.
But then I just group text him with somebody who's asking about it and just kind of make that personal introduction.
I was just wondering in the process of, because we always try to give our customers as much valuable information about whatever topic. Like every time when we have people asking about their house being sold or bought or them buying a house, we can always refer back to the interviews that we did together, so they can, if it's something that they can find in there, good. If not, if they follow up with another question, we might just send it your way. But I was just trying to see if what's the most basic information, maybe a blog article from you personally or from the company itself, that people can just, all right, now I'm getting familiar with it, or at what point you tell them, all right, you bought your house. If you don't have solar, it might be a good idea to just have an idea about what solar can do for you moving forward. So that's I guess the question is more.
It'd be like stirring up, at that point on our end, we'd be wanting to stir up the curiosity to have someone make a conversation, right? Because I certainly, I know where all the information can be found. I do not pretend to have all the information. So what is that teaser or that piece of paper that I can put on and say, hey, have you thought about this?
Exactly.
This might be something that's useful to you. And then, you start to hear some of the objections, and I say, oh, I've heard those objections before. I don't want solar panels on the front of my house. Okay, well, have a conversation. See what the solar production looks like when you don't have solar panels on the front of your house. When you drive by my house, you can't really see. I mean, you can if you're going quick, but you're not going to notice. Right. You're not going to notice the solar panels on my house. I was very intentional. The first design you had did have solar panels on that front roof area, and I was like, I really don't love that. And so we were able to rework it, add some panels over on this side instead of here, move it around. And I think that a lot of the objections, it's not the first time you've heard it, right? It's like an objection in any business. You just have to ask the right person the right question, right? I can't sell my house after. Well, you know what you should do? You should probably call Brian and have some conversations and find out what the the appropriate next steps are. Or I'm not telling you should do it. I'm telling you should ask the questions to the person who knows what they're doing. And that's where the reputation comes in. And you want to have the right people
to be around and
to be able
to have the information.
Answer
and
those
actually,
questions.
This is a good fact that you mentioned the objections. What are, let's say, I don't know if you want me to say top 20, top 10, top 5.
Well,
I don't want panels on the front of my house.
I would have never thought somebody would have, just from a design perspective, to think. I don't think they look. I mean, they even
look
make
a lot better now than they did.
They look much better, yeah. I mean, but the whole
I feel like
design,
they make it look almost futuristic type of.
Right.
Well, yeah, the more modern panels do look very nice. I mean, they're for the most part black, and they look much sleeker than some of the older ones that you see that look like these blue checkerboards. But the whole design aspect is a major part for me, right? So, and especially working in the community I spend most of my time in, which is the town where Matt lives, which is North Andover. It's a fairly affluent community, lots of beautiful homes. People want to preserve how their home looks. So that's one of my major points is I truly want to design something that's going to complement the house, right? And it's not going to take away from the look of the house. I'm a homeowner myself. I've got it on my house, and I'm actually an artist by trade. I'm a painter, muralist, all that kind of stuff. So aesthetics are huge to me. I really want it to look nice, and I almost take it on myself to help change the perspective of what people think solar is going to look like on their house. We haven't really talked much about the design aspect yet, but to me that's super important. I mean, most homeowners, take a lot of pride in their house and they want it to look nice. I want to be sensitive to that, and I really want to make sure that I do something that they're going to be proud of, right? That they're not going to have to feel like they need to answer for, or that they're not going to want to look at.
So on that note, and then we can dive into more objections, but do you mean like you can customize the colors of?
No, gosh.
No, okay.
Oh, that would be cool. Maybe one day, Hey, maybe that's a business venture. Just come up with solar tints or something.
No, I was just thinking, now you said that, and I'm like, does this sound like?
Well, no, but I mean, you can do a lot with a 5x3 rectangle, So,
okay.
So it's just essentially how you're positioning everything and how you're putting everything on or designing something to be laid out on someone's roof. But that's probably the number one objection is people are worried about how it's going to look.
I would have never thought about that. I would have never thought it would be number one objection. Like I don't like.
I grew up landscape, and all I did was take pictures of the front of the houses that I mowed and how straight the lines were and how pretty everything looked. And
I would have never thought that would have been. Not always, but.
So I'm curious, what would you have expected the number one thing to be?
The objection?
Yeah.
Honestly, now after my experience with the guy that I mentioned at the beginning of this show would have been just if I'm a homeowner
selling your house.
Selling the house.
That's
and not being or not knowing exactly the correct course of action in that case, and with the current market or whatever, where does that even fit?
Yes.
So that would have been my thought, but I would have never thought in a million years that
those are probably the top two.
Okay,
honestly, those are probably the top two. Is what happens when I sell my house. What happens when it snows. What's going to happen this wintertime.
That's a good one. So
if it snows, we know it's going to snow. When we're doing our estimation of what the system's going to produce, we're using the weather patterns of the previous 20 years. So we're already factoring in the idea that it's not going to be producing a ton in the fall and winter time. And so that's where those net metering credits really come in, because those are essentially the more net metering credits that you can accumulate in the spring and summertime is what's going to ride you through the winter when the system's not producing as much, right? But so as far as selling the house, and Matt can speak to this, probably, from a different lens or with a different lens than I can, but I've probably had a dozen or more of my customers sell their house with solar, and some of them as often or as soon as a couple of months after installing it on their house. And sometimes people know they're going to sell the house, sometimes they don't know they're going to sell the house. So I've never seen it prevent someone from being able to sell their house. As we kind of talked about before the podcast started, buying versus leasing and all that kind of thing. So there's a lot of confusion there, and I think that's what makes people apprehensive when it comes to that whole concept. Is they'd rather just not complicate things, but it really doesn't complicate much. I mean, you're again, it comes down to the fact you're going to need electricity then next homeowners are going to need electricity. This is a way of essentially being able to provide it at a lower cost, right? So, and that's always people's number one thing is it's going to cost less. But so if you bought the system, paid cash for it, it just comes with the house. It's just part of the house. If you're leasing the system, it's very easy to transfer that lease to the new homeowner. With some
for your company.
Yes.
So, I mean,
right.
I
it
don't
is different
know.
with other companies. Right. And that's why, like Matt was talking about, he was giving the story of how we met. Like, so when I originally knocked on his door, or he was outside. Yeah. But so he actually saw, my company's name on my iPad, and he said, "Oh, actually, well, I've already sold a couple homes with."
I was about to kick him out before. I was about to get off my doorstep, right. And I saw the Vivint.
Right. No, I'll never forget that. It was actually pretty funny.
Also, you were sorry for cutting you. You actually did sell some homes with solar involved.
So
all right. So we'll dive maybe
prior to meeting Brian, I had a couple of houses. The company was Vivint. Recently, 2019, purchased by Sunrun, and the attorneys, the lenders were like, all right, because it was my buyers that were buying this house, and they needed to take over the lease, and they told us it was going to be a pretty simple process and whatnot. Both my attorney and my mortgage lender were so impressed with how simple and easy that transfer was to go from the seller to the new buyer, the new owner. That I thought that was encouraging, right? Because I'm hearing at that point, I forget what year those houses sold. At that point, you're hearing all the horror stories and scare tactics. Just everyone, the misinformation, I think, is a bigger thing.
Right.
And I guess I shouldn't say misinformation because someone had that experience, right? Somebody had an experience of a solar situation not going well. I just don't know what company or what agreements were signed for those particular people. But I was very much not interested in having anyone come chat with me. I think most people, you said it, you get no's more often than you don't, when you're starting to kind of share this information with people. But I definitely had comfort in having an experience with the company prior to the conversation. And then,
go ahead.
Yeah. And then the other piece is the match, right? The way that you sit down and have a conversation with people, right? We went and grabbed coffee when we met, and it was a really nice, easy conversation. You became a couple years ago, yeah. You became a resource for me, and now I have a lot of trust in saying, call Marion and Victor,
and now we're doing these podcasts that like before,
right? And same thing with Brian. I have a lot of confidence that Brian's going to answer. He's not going to push or sell. I mean, that's his job. We all have something
to sell.
We make money when things sell, but that's not the front immediate goal, right? The goal is to solve a problem that you have. You need a house. You need electricity. You need those things. We have a solution. Let's help you understand what the best solution is for you. And I think that's the feel I got from Brian when I was sitting with him. And so that's why I say find the person that you are. So you can have this conversation with.
And it makes a lot of sense, especially because you're dealing with. I shouldn't necessarily say sensitive moment in somebody's life when they need to move, but it's a stressful situation, right? Sure. So then deciding to sell the house, regardless what's the reason, and I'm not talking about investing now, I'm talking about the regular, person that just decide, okay, I need to maybe downgrade or upgrade or whatever the situation may be. But you mentioned that it was a smooth transition. When you have, well, I'm assuming each case is different, so the question might not be so straightforward, but the lease of the solar, does it get blend into the actual mortgage? No. So it has nothing. It's a completely separate transaction. Yeah. It's just a matter of the person.
The solar panels are property, right? And so either if you're owning them, then they're your property. If you're owning them, what we didn't talk about is the loan piece of it.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. So like buying it cash is one thing. buying it with a loan versus a lease
is a very, very different thing.
Is a very different thing. And I think that's where you put totally the liens on the property, right? That's where those come for.
So much, yeah, actually that's...
Like, that's you want to talk objections or like, all the horror stories are coming from...
I think a lot of times they really do result
from the loan?
From a loan. And I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes from, a lot of the nervousness comes from.
You have to pay this back. You have to do this.
People talk about liens and things like that, and that generally only is going to come into play when you take a loan out on the system. So if you buy the system, you can buy it cash if you have your own cash, or you can take a loan out, which means then now you have another lender involved. Now if you sell the house and you've got a loan on your solar system, now you've got to pay off that loan before you can sell your house, before you can close on it. So that's where a lot of the complications and horror stories and can come from. And then people hear about that and they think it's just solar in general.
I think I have at least one question about that scenario. Sure. So when we mentioned at the beginning of this interview, they can buy it in cash, they can lease them, or the prepaid lease. We didn't talk about
didn't talk about financing. Yeah, and
but is that directly with the company, or
it's my bad? No, so that's going to be another
option, like the Ford.
Correct. So you're going to be doing you're going to be taking that loan out with another lender, right? And we have lenders that we work with, but how solar financing works, if you're financing a solar system, and one of the reasons that I don't talk about it a lot, I'm personally, not a huge fan of that option, and the reason is because any solar financing that I've ever seen is accounting for that 30% tax credit. So it's expecting you to pay that 30% tax credit back into the loan within 18 months, right? So it gets a little complicated, right? So let's say
because it depends everybody's situation with taxes,
right?
Like,
exactly.
W-2 versus a contractor versus whatever, or versus whatever your tax bill might be.
Right. So like my math is going to be off here, but let's say that you buy a $30,000 solar system, you're expecting a $10,000 tax credit. So you finance that $30,000 system, right? And the way that the loan is structured is that within 18 months, when you file your taxes and you supposedly get that 10 grand back, you're going to take that 10 grand and you're going to pay it back into the loan towards principal, right? If you do not do that, there aren't any penalties involved, but your payment's going to reamortize and it's going to go up $100 a month.
Okay, so I can see how that can really
this is what your monthly payment's going to be.
So you're not saving money anymore. You're not saving money anymore. Now you come with money out of pocket just for the system.
The equation doesn't work.
Right.
Yeah, the numbers are completely upside down now.
Right.
Possibly. It depends on the tax bill and all the other stuff.
I've had people that did it the right way, and then when they did their taxes several months later, they got their money back and they paid it back into the loan. But then realistically, that's kind of a letdown there too, because you're like there's nothing to be excited about in terms of that tax credit then, because you're not getting that tax credit to take your family to Disneyland or anything. You're taking that tax credit and you got to pay it back into the loan. When you get a big lump sum back in your taxes, do you want to pay all of that back into a loan, or do you want to go and do something with that?
Well, of course, if you can take the money and
I haven't gotten a tax return in several years anyway, but it's like, so when I do see someone that wants to purchase a system, a lot of times it's because they're an independent business owner, investor, or something like that, and they want that tax liability because they don't want to pay in so much, so that can help reduce what they pay in. But if you're looking at financing a solar system, just really be mindful of the fact that you're going to be expected to pay that 30% or so back into the loan. And you don't have to, but then your payment's going to reamortize and make up for those funds, and then you're not going to be saving money at that point.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like there's a three options. There's not really a first place option, but there's definitely a fourth place option. It could be 1, 2, or 3 depending on your scenario, and there may be a reason for 4.
I've seen it work well for some people, but it generally where that breaks down is that it really depends on the person they're having that conversation with. Kind of going back to what Matt said, are they having the right conversation with the people? Because if they're not explaining that explicitly and really, really driving that home, that hey, when you receive that tax credit, you got to pay that back. Because I ran into people too where they said, "Hey, it would have been nice if they told me I had to pay this back into the loan, otherwise my payment went up $150."
Expectations.
I was saving
100%.
I was saving money for the first year, and then all of a sudden my payment went up. And then I've also had people who sold their house and they had a loan on their solar system, and now they're scrambling trying to figure out who's going to pay off the loan so they can close on the house.
Oh, because you did mention that if you finance it in order to sell the house,
right,
you have to pay off the full loan.
Right.
All right, so that's when things can get really tricky because you're not able to pass on.
So if you don't have it, right, you can't transfer a loan.
Yeah,
right?
I see.
Right, so it's like you can transfer the lease. So if you don't have the cash up front to do it, your better option is probably to lease, because then you've got the most flexibility. You can sell the house and transfer it to the new homeowner if they want it, or the new homeowner, at least with Sunrun, has the option of just buying that system. They don't have to lease it. Other companies will require that new homeowner to take over the lease, or they're not buying your house. With Sunrun, they have the option of either taking over the lease and finishing whatever you started, right? Starting from where you leave off, right? Or we give them the option to just buy the system, and now they own it, and then they're done, right?
And then, so the ones that Matt, this question is more for you. The houses that you sold, were all of them leased panels, or you can?
I just sold one that I was the buyer agent on, and they were owned panels, paid off, owned, and that was
paid off too. Okay,
so they had to set up their warranty and their service program or whatever with that, switch that over. But most of them have been the lease, and so when the property gets listed, the combination, there's a system in place that Sunrun will reach out with a coordinator, right, that will help you kind of handle that whole switchover and that whole process. And it's a fairly simple conversation back and forth. Here's some documentation. The buyer will need to do some additional paperwork, right? They have to sign all the documents. They have to get their information over to the solar company. But it's a fairly easy thing. Everyone's got to do their job, right? I had one that was a pain in the neck, but it was really just because, again, misinformation. The lender was telling him, don't do anything until after the loan commitment. And I don't necessarily understand why the lender, I was the listing agent on that one. I understand why the lender was telling him that. I don't know if it was a debt to income ratio, or I don't know what misconception he had in his head. That lender was putting his person at risk, because now he's putting his financing commitment behind him and then having him do something, which doesn't make any sense. If there were going to be any financial implications, wouldn't you want to do that prior to the financing contingency date? But that was the only headache, was because the buyer didn't do their job. Other than that, on the seller side and the Sunrun side, it was a pretty smooth transaction.
That's another point between the loan and lease as well, is if somebody's looking at putting solar into their house, if they're trying to keep themselves flexible, and they want they want that flexibility. If they're taking a loan out on the system, then they're affecting their debt to income ratio. They're getting a hard pull on their credit. They're taking a loan out. You know what I mean? So that's going to affect their ability to borrow money in the future and so forth, where a lease will not.
Right. Do you see, again, I guess it relates more to the value of the house. Let's say it is a paid off, like the transaction that you mentioned. Mm-hmm. Does it bring value to the house, or is not considered one of those situations as you would, let's say, add a bedroom and a bathroom or whatever? Is that an improvement?
That's definitely a harder one to nail down, and you'll see that in
Well, you get that a lot.
I guess that's something that, yes, people will ask a lot, and I think people they almost want to test me as a salesperson, and they want to see if I'm going to tell them that, oh yeah, your house is going to be worth all this more money because you've got solar on it. And realistically, I really try not to be the salesperson when it comes to things like that. I really try to take anything that's salesy or sales speak out of my vocabulary, and I never want to come across as somebody that way. But what I can at least tell someone is it's not going to make their house worth less. Right, I can't promise them.
That's a good way of answering. Yeah,
right. I can't promise them it's going to make their house worth $50,000 more or $100,000 more, but I can tell them it's not going to make their house worth less. Now, moving forward, as we move into the future, I really do believe that we're going to reach a stage where if your home is absolutely unsuitable for solar, even if it's a beautiful house, if it's completely unsuitable for solar, it's going to be less desirable, therefore worth less, right, than a home that has solar or is a good candidate for solar. Right.
I think if, looking, I'm trying to think of the right word, but like appraisers, right? At the end of the day, buyers and sellers are determining the price because they're the value of your home because they're agreeing on a price. Then the appraiser comes in, which is a whole different scenario. And so they're the ones that have to somehow put value. And they do provide value. It's not, like I put $40,000 solar panels on my roof. I want $40,000 more on my value. That doesn't equate. The value is in
for the right person.
What the buyer that's looking at your house that sees the value in solar, that sees the monthly payment, sees the actual like how it affects your living. When you start talking about, am I going to say, oh, this house has solar? There's still not a ton of data out there, right? And that's where all the appraisers are stuck. There's not a lot of houses selling, never mind houses with solar panels selling. So then you have to look for trends on houses with solar panels, but that house with the solar panel is next to the highway.
Like 20 miles
this
away.
One's over here. This, there's so many variables
right.
on value
right.
that it's hard to like nail down what it does specifically.
I think we'll get more data on that though, and I think we will see that. I mean, that homes that are more efficient are going to have more value. But I guess I try to be careful because I never want someone to be able to like.
You don't want that to be the
you
decision maker. Yeah,
right.
No, and I can see how that can create some confusion.
What's the installation? How old is your heating system? Is it a newer heating system?
Right.
A heat pump, right? Is it a 1970s heat pump that didn't work in 1970 and now it's using all the electricity, or is it modern?
Even to the fact, it's like, okay, so if you got a brand new house and it's got all Anderson windows, you know what I mean? As a realtor, are you going to go in there and ask about the manufacturer of all the parts of the house, or are you going to ask about the square footage and the location?
Right. It's true.
You can spend $50,000 on windows or $10,000 on windows. Are you going to get that back?
The buyers will come in and feel how well you've taken care of your house and the quality of the house, and they will ask like, "Oh, can I see their utility costs?" Yeah, they're a family of 7 with 2 parents that work from home, and and you're moving in with 2
and
people
and 3 teens that have 3 PlayStations.
Do we really want to compare your utility costs? But I think. You do get to the point where it's at least some information to say, wow, that's really not that bad for your utility costs, or wow, that's outrageous for utility costs. I think that's what people are looking for when they ask that question, even though they don't take into consideration
the final decision.
Who's actually living in the house and how do they use it is more. Your current house is probably more likely to be or more
be suitable to
compare what your new utilities are, because it's you living the way that you live.
Right.
Yeah, I remember the first house that I sold, because we never even lived, like me and my wife, we never lived there. It was an Airbnb that was booked 90-something% of the month, and mostly it was groups of 8 and more. Mm-hmm. And then when the family bought it, I remember they were asking for the utility bill, and I'm like, I remember I said to the real estate agent, this was back in 2018, I'm like, I don't know if this actually makes sense, because we have, I remember the house was getting booked on VRBO 2 to 3 weeks a month by a team of 10 contractors. They were coming from Jersey to do some work here, 3 weeks every month almost for the last 6 months. And you can imagine 10 men. Right. During the day, they were probably at work, but then when they were getting home, they were home. So 10 people versus a family of 2 parents and a kid, whole different.
Right. Sure. Right.
So, but to your point, I guess a lot of, I feel like a lot of times we as consumers, we don't even know what questions to ask. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that's where kind of you come in really helpful with painting the picture for each and every body's case and scenario and what their the plans are.
Even that, right?
And then you with real estate when it comes to
So when people ask me questions about solar, I don't I don't answer the questions about solar. I redirect the questions to Brian, or I'll ask Brian the questions. Sure. I think that's huge right now is you're going to ask all different people, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Well, where did their information come from? Right?
Doesn't matter what they think.
Trust the person who's in it every day. And ultimately, yes, you're a salesperson, but the thing I like is I haven't gotten that vibe of like, I'm just in it for the quick buck. Here we go. Right. Your reputation. If someone cares about their reputation, they don't care about the one sale. Right. And
I totally got that.
Huge. Right. And so I think when you are considering this and you go to Facebook and you ask, hey, what do you think about solar? First off, most people haven't had an experience strong enough one way to actually share a normal experience. They've either been someone who has built a really good relationship,
who had a friend,
or someone that was given the wrong information, or the expectations were set improperly from the person they got their information from, and they have a terrible experience. And they are the ones that are most passionate. All of the review sites are just people that want to complain about everything. And so find someone that you trust. Find a family member that had a good experience and go ask the solar person the solar questions. Moving. Listen, I know that there are some horror stories with other movers. You want to get quotes,
mostly horror.
Right. You want to get quotes from other movers than Premium Q. Go ahead and do that. But I would say take your quote from the other company and bring it back to Marion and Victor and say, hey, can you take a look at this and tell me how yours compares to that? Now you can say, oh, did you know about did you know about this? Did you know about all these little secret quirks that they throw into the estimates that surprise you and cause you anxiety and stress on the other side of things?
No, and when you first started the phrase, I completely got it wrong. I thought you meant be careful when you ask family members about this. Remember the story?
Uncle Bob, the contractor.
Uncle Bob would have will have his own opinion about solar and how to buy and sell a house in 2023. With Uncle Bob sold or maybe bought a house back in '78.
Right. My friend's cousin's sister who got solar, had this issue with it.
Right, exactly.
All right, so then if someone wants to get a quote or at least have their questions answered, where they can go to get in touch with you?
Sure, if they'd like to have the conversation, right, so they can find me on Facebook. I'm Brian, B-R-I-A-N, last name is Cartier, C-A-R-T-I-E-R. Or on Instagram is B_Cartier. I don't know if you typically give phone numbers or anything like that.
Yeah, you can mention the phone number. We'll put them in the description.
Yep,
anyway,
so my phone number is 603-609-8030. My email is first name Brian, B-R-I-A-N .Cartier, C-A-R-T-I-E-R @sunrun, SUNRUN.com. Best ways to reach me. Always open to have the conversation. And
what's typically the process? Do they call? Do you ask them some questions over the phone?
Yeah, I mean, typically, I'll try to get an idea of
square footage.
Yeah, well, or even just have a conversation in terms of like how they use the home, who they are, what they do, you know what I mean, and like I truly want to know who I'm working with, and the more I know about their lifestyle, the better I can help them. Are they planning on getting a hot tub next year? Are they getting an EV next year? Do they have an EV? Like. Do they have experience with solar already? And just kind of, so I can do my best to kind of meet them where they're at and do my best to try to set them up for success in the future with their solar system. So, and then typically I'll meet them at their home, right? And I'll get their energy consumption from the utility bill and I'll enter that in and we'll try to design a system that's going to, do its best to meet their needs, right, or their future needs, and is going to work for their home and hopefully be something that's going to be aesthetically pleasing for their home.
Gotcha. No, that makes perfect sense. Before we wrap things up, do you feel, is there any important question that I should have asked that maybe people might get value from and I totally missed it?
I think we covered a lot of ground here. I mean, typically the questions are, like what's it going to cost?
And I know for those, it's hard to say, and then people will be able to.
Sure, but I mean, the typical are, what's it going to cost? What happens if I sell my house? Which we covered. What happens if it snows? Which we covered. What happens at the end of 25 years, which I think we covered. So, I mean, you can either decide to keep the system, you can renew and upgrade and get a new system, or you can just have us remove the system, which doesn't cost anything at that point if you're leasing the system. If you buy it, then it's yours. It's up there. But and then what happens when it goes wrong if something doesn't work, and so I mean we've got we've got the app that you can reach out to people through. You can always any of my clients can reach out to me directly. In fact, I mean as my network and my reputation grows, I get people reach out all the time that either have solar from another company or have it with Sunrun and can't reach their particular rep or whatever, and I'm always willing to help. So there's other people out there as well that are listening to this podcast that just have questions that might even be a Sunrun customer or a solar customer. I'm happy to help however I can. If there's something that's not understood.
Love it, man. Yeah. Matt, anything you want to add to the?
No, I think it's been great to have Brian as a resource over the last few years, not only for my personal solar panels, but also for my customers and my clients. And
And I'll just say too, that's one thing that I have noticed as it's become more and more prevalent. I've got more and more real estate agents reaching out just because they see my name. I'm sorry, man, cheating on you. No, but just because they're seeing it so much more, whether or not they're showing homes that have solar or they've got listings that have solar and they just haven't dealt with it before. And doing my best to make as many allies on that side of things as I can, because again, there's so much misinformation out there within the real estate world where there's just a lot of things that just aren't understood, or they've heard that one horror story and they think that that's how it is. Period. So, I'm grateful to be able to be a resource to people and in general, and just help the cause however I can.
No, that's helpful because. Again, I like in my case, I remember the first time when I kind of got introduced to solar. Well, I mentioned that, but then when I feel like I didn't get enough information back when I asked about the whole selling process and the fact that I was in a rush when I wanted to sell the house, but then the house didn't sell. So those questions could have been answered much better, I feel like. So I feel like, in this case, you come really helpful with having your experience and your expertise in it. All right, guys. Well, it was a pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks,
I feel like this is a topic that I never really thought about having it on the show for our possible audience.
Well, we need people to move.
But
if
it's
they're afraid of buying solar panels.
No, this was great actually.
I don't get the sale. You don't get the move. And, so let's make sure that people are getting the right information and able to do that on the move.
100%. And also, guys, anybody that's listening or watching this episode, if you guys have any particular questions about this, of course, you can feel free to put them in the comments or send it to Brian directly, because all his information is going to be in the description below. But I feel like the easiest way would be to contact him, get in touch, see exactly where do you stand, what are your options, and then go from there. There's no hard sell or anything like that on his end. I remember when you reached out and said, "Man, do you think solar might be a good topic?" And I'm like, "If you think so." And then you said, "Well, I know Brian. I've been working with him." And I'm like, "Done." And it's the same because I trust you, and we've been, friends and pretty much business partners for all these years. Anybody that you would refer to us, it's a really trusted resource because I know you wouldn't put your name on your customers' end as well. So Brian, was great meeting you. Great
likewise
hearing all the valuable information that you shared with us here on the show. And then until the next one, guys, we'll catch you soon. Bye.